Reports the past few days that he met his voice coach in person at Labour HQ on Christmas Eve 2020. Now, you will know, and he will have known as well as one of the top lawyers in this country previously, that there were strict Tier 4 restrictions in London at the time. Not legally binding measures, but they were strict guidance. He would have to resign, wouldn't he, if he'd made a breach of lockdown rules, even if they were historically?
Well, I think what we're seeing again is more mudslinging by the Tories on this issue at a time when they were partying, and we've got all the evidence of that and the sorry tale of that. Keir was working. Working was allowed in Tier 4 in London at that time.
Well, no, the full list of those that were allowed to be working were frontline health workers, which are doctors and nurses, teachers and social workers, key public services, government workers, food production workers, public safety workers, air and rail transport workers and utilities. So where do you think the voice coach fits on that list?
So my understanding is working, and Keir was working at that time, preparing for interviews and so on in the run-up to, I believe it's 2020, wasn't it? So the run-up to those Brexit discussions and leaving and interviews for that. And that was a working event at the time when we know that what the Tories were doing, partying, that's well documented. It's a sad and sorry tale of that time, and I think this is just more mudslinging on their behalf.
But he broke the rules by meeting with someone who wasn't on the key worker list, and a voice coach, as I've just read out that list, is not on that list. He said, this is Keir Starmer, made a pledge and a promise that if he was found to have broken the rules during the Beergate controversy in Durham in 2021, he said he would resign. So if he is found to have broken the rules, and there's some suggestion that he has, should he resign as Prime Minister?
Well, I think this is all hypothetical and speculation. It's the same MP that started that last investigation that is starting this one. We want to get on with changing the country. That's why I'm here today talking about cancer that infects one in two. Half of us are going to get cancer. Some of us have had diagnosis of cancer in the last year. I think that's what the country wants us to get on with. That's what Keir is focused on, the future, getting us treated, getting us through those waiting lists faster. And those are the things that are really occupying us at this time.
Well, good luck to you in trying to achieve that, Karen. Appreciate Karin Smith is a health minister. Thank you very much indeed. Back here in studio, Jonathan Ashworth and Anna Firth. Anna, what do you think about Keir Starmer's essential worker on Christmas Eve?
I think absolutely shame on him. He has spent years criticising Boris Johnson and the Conservatives for breaking lockdown rules, which I don't condone in any way whatsoever. And now we find out he's doing exactly the same thing. And on Christmas Eve, how can he possibly be arguing that he needed to see a voice coach on Christmas Eve? The whole thing is laughable. And these were the words. These were the words of a Labour briefing line issued in 2020 when he was first accused of breaking the rules. He is Mr. Rules. And he said it time after time in Parliament that he had not broken any rules. And this isn't just guidance. This was the law, that you could not meet anybody who was not a key worker during Tier 4. This was the time when everyone was told that, really sadly, you're not going to be able to see your relatives over Christmas. So
is this a resigning issue?
Well, he's made it, according to himself.
He made a pledge.
According to himself, he made a pledge. So unless this is going to be yet another pledge that he breaks, yes, we've got to find out if the police are going to take action. That's the key. He said this is against the law, and if it is against the law, and if he is charged, then he should stick to his word.
Well, I mean, Anna says this is exactly the same as Boris Johnson. It most certainly isn't. I mean, Boris Johnson allowed more raves in Downing Street than a beefer, frankly. And what this was a member of his extended staff coming in to help him prepare for a speech. Now, I was the Shadow Health Secretary throughout that time. I was in Parliament every week because there were statements every week in Parliament, and you did have to have some of your staff in and around to help you prepare for your parliamentary...
Christmas Eve, Jonathan, you're
seriously
saying that you would have been preparing a speech.
Well, that's because we were sitting over that period to get Boris Johnson's Brexit deal through because Parliament unusually was sitting in that period. We weren't having the Christmas break in the way in which we normally do. So if you're preparing a speech, you have your staff there. That's the point.
OK. Guys, thank you very much indeed. Some very interesting stuff to debate there. Your views are very welcome. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, will join forces with a former Conservative minister to set up a council on Islam and free speech.
Well, it's expected to be made up of 16 members who will tackle Islamophobia and aid the government in officially defining it.
Well, this comes as the Deputy Prime Minister has faced backlash after giving 6 councils the green light to raise their council tax by up to 10%.
Well, with us now to discuss this is political editor of The Spectator, Katie Balls. Good to see you this morning, Katie. And tell us about this plan by Angela Rayner, then, to create a council on Islamophobia.
Yeah, so this goes back to an all-party parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia, which long before the Labour Party was in government, they adopted. But the question is, will the government now adopt this definition? And if so, what are the ramifications? And Angela Rayner has this council. They're going to consult on it. Dominic Grieve, the former Tory MP, he is going to be on the figures involved, apparently. And I think where the debate is if you go back to the definition from this all-party parliamentary group, at the time there are warnings that the definition was far too broad and it would go beyond just stopping Muslim hate speech and trying to clamp down on this and could actually curb freedom of speech and become a de facto blasphemy law. Wherefore you couldn't really criticise religion or the Muslim faith, even when it is more of a freedom of speech angle, as opposed to something that you could say is, hate speech towards someone. So if Angela Rayner was to bring a definition, and it's not clear if it would be the definition already on the table or a different one, I think there'll be a lot of criticism probably from the Tories, Reform and others that this is going beyond the scope of what they claim it does.
And Robert Jenrick has said exactly that. This is the Trojan horse for a blasphemy law protecting Islam. He's actually gone further, saying that this Labour government displays an Orwellian disregard for freedom of speech. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the freedom of speech, you can go broader in terms of some of the things that the government first did, on freedom of speech on campuses. Bridget Phillips had to row back slightly on the paused freedom of speech bill from the Tories. So I think that Labour have always been a different place to the Conservatives on this. And I think the question is just what does it set in motion? Because obviously you have all these debates going on at the moment when it comes to lots of issues where people don't feel as though they've been able to say what they think. So you go back to the grooming gang scandal, for instance, and Pakistani gangs, people felt they couldn't talk about this. If you have one of these definitions, there is a risk that, legitimate conversations about concerns in communities, integration, start to go off the table if you get the definition wrong.
So when you think about it, then how much of this is about securing a vote, a Muslim-based vote for the Labour Party, as opposed to protecting religion and religious rights?
So we know that the Labour Party, when it comes to their voter base, has won lots of Muslim votes in the past. But obviously that relationship has been tested. And I think if you think about the Gaza-Palestine position, Labour has an issue with their Muslim vote. And you saw that in the most recent general election, all these pro-Gaza independents. So I think the party does feel it has to do a lot of work to get those voters back, and they want to get those voters back. On this, I'm not sure if this is seen as, the big vote winner to do that. But, of course, I think it would be popular with certain groups that feel as though that they, do receive criticism or, stoking tensions. So it could play to that.
I thought, all religions, it was an offence to be deliberately offending to other religious views anyway. I thought this would have been already taken care of. And last week I read, and I didn't know this, that Poland, 500,000 people took to the streets of Poland, and then they declared that Poland was a Catholic state. And that was the way we are Church of England, the way. So one wonders, well, right, the Church of England are the bosses, or they're supposed to be. Why are we worrying about everybody else? This is fundamentally a Christian country. Why are we worrying about what views Muslims have?
Well, I think on that, I suppose there are a large number of Muslims in this country, of course, and I think that if you look at, there have been obviously some hate incidents against Muslims. You also have a question about whether Christians feel they can have their freedom of speech. But you recently had a Labour MP at Prime Minister's Questions almost ask for a blasphemy law in their question and saying, this country is too divisive, you need to look at this. And Keir Starmer did not knock it down. He didn't really answer the question, which is why I think this, is something where, in terms of the Labour government, I think that when you look at all the language, so when there ever is an incident, they're very keen to talk about how they need to stamp out hate towards the Muslim community. And they clearly see this as a very live issue. And I think that's why you can see Angela Rayner being on a path where they could bring this in.